Welcome to another episode of Behind the Now. Today I get to chat with director and writer Almog Avidan Antonir. Almog received his BFA in film production from Chapman University. While in college, he co-founded the YouTube channel Almost Cool Films, featuring narrative shorts that received millions of views and over 130K subscribers. He went on to direct commercials and original branded content for brands such as Toyota, Bud Light, Sony Pictures, Lionsgate, and Invisalign, to name a few. Almog's films have screened at top-tier international film festivals. His most recent directorial feature film, Trust, is currently making its way through the film festival circuit, already having won Best Feature New Visions Jury Award and Best Feature Drama Audience Award at CineQuest Film Festival. Listen in to sneak behind the scenes to the magic behind Almog's directing, as well as dive into the craft of writing. Hey Almog, thank you so much for being on this with me today. I'm so excited to talk with you. So thanks for doing this.
Of course. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, of course. So you are a director and writer. I recently saw a screening of Trust, which you directed, which was incredible. So first, I'm just going to ask you, how did you get into entertainment at all? How did you get into directing and writing? When did you know you wanted to do that? Yes, go from there, like from the beginning.
Wow. Well, I guess it's been a long time. I kind of started getting into like just being excited about making movies, like all the way back in like middle school. So we're going back real far. But I kind of made some movies for fun with my friends. And I was like, well, that's kind of fun. And then in high school, I did even more of it. And then that's when I started like thinking about it as a career. Maybe, like I was like, okay, maybe I know it'll be hard, but maybe there's a world it can happen. And then went to Chapman for film school. And then right after I graduated, I kind of made some short form content on YouTube with three of my good friends, and we got lucky that it took off on YouTube. And then because we kind of had an audience for it, we started working with brands and made like commercials and stuff. And that's kind of how I got immersed in that world. And then that led to kind of the longer form stuff.
Yeah. Oh, that's incredible. So on YouTube in the early days, what was the content kind of like? What was the genre? Like, what was that?
So it was very like comedy heavy. So the channel, it's called Almost Cool Films. And we had like a couple kind of viral shows, Long Story Short and Wiener versus Brain. And that was, so my three friends and I, they're, actors. Actually, one of them is, one of my friends is Heston, and he's actually in Trust. He plays Josh, the brother. So we've been friends and making stuff together for a long time. So yeah, it was very much like sketch comedy, like web series, kind of stuff.
Okay, incredible. And you were writing and directing.
Yeah, so I mean, if I wrote most of the content, the other guys also wrote some of the stuff, but I would say I wrote like a bulk of it and then directed all of it for the channel as well.
Okay, so you studied film in undergrad, and then after that you just started making your own content, and it really took off, it sounds like.
Yeah, so we got kind of lucky that it was a lot of work, but we also got lucky that some of our YouTube content took off. It kind of went viral thanks to Reddit, and then that led to commercial stuff. So yeah, we got a little lucky, but that's kind of how that transition happened.
Yeah, it's so incredible. So what is your directing style like? Like, so once you've attached to a project, like kind of break down, what do you do? So you decide, even before that maybe, like how do you determine if it's a script you want to direct, for instance?
Yeah, so I mean, a lot of times obviously I direct my own stuff, which is a lot easier. I write what I want to see and then direct it. But if it's somebody else approaching me with a script, I look for kind of fun and interesting characters, because like performance is the most interesting thing to me, the most fun
Right.
part of the directing job. So like working with actors. So I look for characters that are interesting for me to like, explore, to want to explore. And then the tone of the script,
Yeah.
that's another part. Like, is it fun? Does it have like maybe bits of comedy that we can explore? Does it have drama? I like scripts that, are a mesh
Yeah.
of different genres. So yeah, it kind of depends. I like
Yeah.
diving
Okay.
into all
Cool.
different types of genre. So if a script offers something interesting to like sink my teeth into, then that's kind of what I look for.
And then what's kind of your process with actors? So do you like to have rehearsal process? Do you like it to be more improv-ish? Or does it differ? Yeah. How do you go about that?
Yeah, so I mean, it differs a little bit. Oh, let me turn this off. It differs a little bit per project, but
Uh-huh.
I prefer to. Obviously, I would love to have rehearsal whenever possible. Sometimes the budget doesn't lend itself to a ton of rehearsal, but in an ideal world, we would have a day
Right.
or even two to rehearse a scene, especially if it's like an important one or a more complicated one. But more often than not, we don't have that luxury. So, I mean, I like, obviously we have rehearsal before shooting the scene. So even if it's the day of filming, like before we even get the camera crew in there, it's like figuring out the scene with the actors. What are little moments in the script that we can kind of find that day. Obviously, it's exciting to find stuff in the moment. I'm very much for rehearsal and like planning, but you plan as much as possible to leave
Yeah.
room for those moments of like, creativity in the moment. And then as far as like
Yeah, I
improv,
love that.
there's definitely room for improv. Again, I would say I'm more so like by the script or following the script, but I think there's
Yeah.
enough room. Obviously, you want to work with creative and smart people in all departments and actors to find those moments. If somebody comes in with an idea that day or that moment, or even if we don't talk about it mid take, something amazing happens, like I'm all for it.
Yeah, I love that. I love that you create an environment in which that's welcomed as well, because like everyone is on the same page, it sounds like, of course, in terms of the story and the script, but there's still room for those impulses for actors to follow those impulses.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely try to yeah. I think it's great to have it. Otherwise, it feels like too rigid. You want to have some room for that.
Yeah, I love that because I always think what happens in the moment overrides anything that could have been planned before, So even if, like anything on the page, even if something else is like happens, of course, still serving the story, not like whatever,
Of course. But that's the thing. Obviously, ideally, you do enough prep. Even as an actor, you understand your character enough leading into production. You do enough, character work and like really dig into the script enough so that in the moment you already know the character so well that things pop up in the moment that make sense for the character and the story.
Yeah, that you can let it go. And I love that. So what does your preparation look like before you're working with actors? Obviously, you read the script, but what else? Like, do you kind of break it down the same way actors would, but for everyone, or what's your process like, if much, or maybe it starts?
Yeah, so it's my process. I love having, well, it's kind of a must, like having the conversations with actors beforehand. So, like on Trust, for example, with almost everyone, we would have like a Zoom call for like an hour. the actor beforehand, just talked about the script, the story, like big picture, and then obviously focusing on the character. What is the purpose of the character in the story, and then obviously like creating a backstory if it's not there in the script, and like I have ideas obviously, and I'll sprinkle those in, but I think a lot of times actors come in with those ideas. So it's like asking the actor, like, so what do you think for this character? Like when you read the script, how do you feel about this character? What do you think they would do? Or what happened to them in the past? Or so kind of, it's just like give and take. Like you hear the ideas and you're like, cool, that's great. That makes sense. Here's also what I was thinking. And then you develop the character, and then for the like main characters, the kind of the lead and the main supporting, you could say, those are like more extensive conversations. So even with like, on trust, like the three siblings, which are played by Jen and Kate and Heston, they're all amazing actors. And the three of them and I sat down like 4 or 5 times to not even like rehearse necessarily, but more to discuss, because there's relationships between each of those characters, and there's like an arc obviously for each one of those characters. So just to kind of talk about them in detail, and then those conversations are the foundation like for the rehearsal. And then as much as we got to rehearse, which we did like 1 or 2 days of rehearsal before we started filming.
Okay. Oh, awesome. Okay, cool. Yeah, definitely. Those conversations are extremely valuable because even, because besides like getting on the same page, there's something that even happens where each character and the story and everything kind of marinates in you, like there's a certain something that happens even just with time before you don't even before it's even on its feet yet or rehearsed at all yet, Yeah.
With Kate, there were moments, I remember there were specific scenes where we were like, why would she do this? Like in the script, where both of us were like, let's let that simmer, because I didn't have, I was still figuring out the character, like along with Kate. We were kind of figuring out the character together. Obviously, we had a good idea of the character, but like certain scenes or certain moments were like, let's come back to that and see what would be a reason for her to do that. So it's like, you need to let it simmer sometimes to really figure out every beat.
Yeah, and I love that you said that, because sometimes, like especially when there's such like even auditions where there's such a definite like short deadline, like you have like a few days or whatever. But sometimes when you like you haven't quite figured out a piece of it, or like to not like sometimes instead of overthinking or like trying to figure out logically, there's something to that, like acknowledge, okay, there's a hole here, but let it kind of be, like do other like any the other stuff, and then often that'll just get filled out. It'll hit you. But it's a good thing. Yeah, it's a cool thing to note that, to take that approach sometimes. I think actually most of the time. Yeah.
And I think it's, it's easy for people to think, obviously as a director, you're supposed to like have all the answers, or like something comes up on set, and like you're supposed to, like you do. But sometimes even on set, if like something would, things change all the time. Like we're running out of time to do whatever this plan was, or like even like an acting question, like why would I do it this way or whatever. Like sometimes if I don't have the moment immediately, which obviously you do enough prep to ideally have the answer as quickly as possible to get things moving. But sometimes if I need a second, I'd be like, give me a moment, and I'd step away for 2 minutes and I'd think about it, and then I'd come back with like the answer or an answer. I don't think there's the answer always. There's obviously like 100 ways to do everything. But sometimes you need to step away for a bit to like, clear your mind or like figure it out.
Yeah, definitely. That's yeah, it's a great point to bring up, you know? Also in terms of blocking, for example, do you normally do that with the actors? Like let them you can kind of see what their impulses are and like where they're going and what they're doing, and then you either kind of solidify and go with that, or how do you do that? How do you go about blocking?
So blocking, I kind of, interestingly enough, like I block it relatively thoroughly in my mind, like before coming to set.
Okay.
Because we like shot
Okay.
list and have an idea of what
Yeah.
the shots are, and kind of how it'll edit together.
Yeah,
Also
exactly.
because I edit a lot too. Like I edited Trust, for example, so I have an idea of how it'll piece together. So I come in with as
Um, okay,
concrete
incredible.
of an idea to set, of the blocking, but
Yeah,
obviously things change all the time. So you have to come with like an open mind, like come with a solid, again,
yeah,
foundation, but then have room for changes
yeah,
because
uh-huh,
things
yeah,
are going to change. Like, for example, I don't know,
yeah,
one moment I'm thinking of, like in Trust, we had this very like intricate like oneer, this like long take, as part of the like after this funeral scene, and like I lost many
okay,
nights of sleep
yeah,
trying to figure out the blocking in my head beforehand. And
uh-huh,
there was a specific moment in the shot where I was like, okay, there'll be this like kind of dance where there's a conversation between like Kate, played by Jen, and then her father, played by
uh-huh,
Lyndon, Damien, played by Lyndon. And there was a specific moment where the blocking, I thought they would like switch positions and it would be this whole metaphor, blah, blah, blah. And then we were in the space and
uh-huh,
like didn't work at all. Like I remember thinking, like we tried like
yeah,
different takes. We're like, okay, let's try an inch this way so the camera could get around. Like didn't work. So then we're like, all right, we got to change it up. And then
yeah,
we changed it, and it works so much better, like for camera and for their performance. So sometimes it's like you come in with an idea, but then like the actors and like them like following their intuition and their like intention in the scene
yeah,
helps shape a lot of the
right,
a lot of the blocking, obviously.
yeah. Oh, I love that. So yeah, it sounds like all around, it's always prepare as much as you can, of course, and like
Right.
everything.
It's very much like kind of like acting where you remember, forget. That's
Yeah,
kind of it's
yeah,
a
yeah,
version of that with filmmaking in general. Like you come as prepared as possible, and
right,
then in the moment things just don't happen as you plan, so you gotta like
yeah.
be flexible.
Yeah, I love that. Like, I love all the sides of that, I love the preparation, and then
Mhm.
I love also, like, having to let it go. So that's
Yeah,
cool.
totally.
Have you studied acting out of curiosity? Yeah, I assume. It sounds like it.
It's funny you say that because no, actually, I had one like actors or acting for directors workshop. It was my single like acting
Oh,
class,
okay.
and it was such a fun
Yeah,
class. Honestly, to this day, I kind of like wished, and it's never too late, right? I can always like pick up an acting class, but there's I think there's a lot of value in like understanding the acting process, which I'm lucky to have learned through working with actors, like because a lot of my best friends are
yeah, it
actors, and
sounds yeah,
I've gotten to work with them for like years. So like just talking about the acting like
yeah.
process, and so I've learned a lot. I've learned as much from like the actors I've worked with. So that was kind of
Yeah, for
my
sure.
my glimpse into like acting.
Yeah, no, because it doesn't need to be like a literal class. It just sounds like you're very in tune. It just sounds like it, like I can
Oh well,
tell how
thanks.
you seem to direct. It seems very yeah. No, really, just even just from this conversation, you can tell that you're very aware. That's what it feels like. You're very aware of how actors work. I
Well,
mean, it
thanks.
makes sense, but yeah,
Hopefully that's it's very much a conversation. And I think
yeah,
the goal is to work with actors who are great at what they do. And then the conversation leads to the best version
yeah.
of the character.
I love that. So talk a bit more about so writing. So because you write as well. What do you like to write? Like what genres, what types of projects? I know you also co-write. Um, yeah, talk about the process. Like where do you start for writing and how do you go about it? Yeah.
Yeah, so man, writing is so frustrating. I mean, I love it, but it is also extremely frustrating. I feel like I'm in a constant
Yeah.
state of like writer's block, until you like figure it out, and then you
Yeah.
like
I tell right,
somehow
right.
vomit 15 pages in a
Right.
day. You're like, where did this come from? But yeah, I mean, writing, I like to write. Again, I kind of love diving into various genres. I wouldn't say that I'm I have
Okay,
one genre that
awesome.
I'm focus on. Obviously, it all started with
Yeah.
comedy on YouTube. I would say comedy with heart
Okay.
is maybe what I would uh, brand
Yeah.
that as. But yeah, I mean, I
Uh-huh.
love drama. I also, I love horror, elements of horror as well.
Mhm.
So kind of a little bit of everything, but the main, I know it's extremely cliche to say, but it's like as long as the story is good and the characters are interesting, then the genre is less
Yeah.
important.
To
Yeah.
what extent do you outline? Like, okay, so you have an idea. What do you do? Like, how do you start it? Because I know it's like differs for everyone, you know? Like some people plot comes more easily to them and some people characters do.
I would say plot comes more easily in writing than
Mhm.
characters do. The characters
Mhm.
become clearer as I write. Um, but I'm a huge advocate of outlining. I kind of outline as much as humanly possible, so that when I start writing, I know,
Mm.
this scene leads to this scene. This needs to happen, because 50 pages
Yeah.
later or whatever. So I love outlining, and that way too. If I am approaching a scene and I'm not sure how to end it, I can be like, cool, this scene, I'll come back to it. Let's move on to the next scene, because in my outline I know what needs to happen in the
Yeah.
next scene. So sometimes if there's a scene I already know
Yeah,
what I
that
want
is
to
cool.
want to happen or tackle in that scene, I'll just kind of fast forward to that scene.
Mhm. Do you ever find that you've outlined, like you have your outline and then when you're actually writing it, you have a kind of like an impulse to kind of just write this other thing, like go in another direction and then or no? And like what do you do with that situation? Like do you explore that other thing that you're like wanting to write? Not like a totally different thing, but you know how like it can like lead to kind of
Oh, for sure. I mean, what I will do is I'll definitely incorporate most of the time. I'll implement this new idea, or I'll make a
Mhm.
note. I always have notes going at the same time, oh, try this and that, or here's another idea that came in. Maybe write it as you initially planned for, but just pop this note in so I don't forget it, so that when I have the full picture of the script, like test that out, or explore that, put a little more time thinking into that idea.
Mm. Yeah, okay. And do you follow any specific beat sheet or not really at this point? Like you probably do, but is it one that we would know that you tend to use, like Save the Cat or like any of them?
Not necessarily. Um, Obviously, there's your 3 act structure. So
Right, yeah.
I mean, there's an element. I wouldn't say I follow it to a T, like I look at a beat sheet necessarily, but obviously there's the
Yeah.
establishing the world and the character, and then what's the inciting incident, and the challenges and then kind of coming back to the world. It's kind of like a like I don't know, the hero's journey-esque of beats, but not
Yeah.
necessarily consciously thinking about it. As a director, obviously, when you're like making a feature film, or not even a feature film, a short film, like there's always like a 3 act structure, even if it's like a short form. So having an idea of that just helps with telling the story.
Okay, that's incredible. So for someone looking to get into directing and writing, maybe they've just finished school, like what advice do you have for them? What advice do you have?
Yeah, well, again, it's maybe a little bit cliched, but like I always say, like just keep making stuff. That was like my
Yeah.
motto coming out of Chapman. You can either wait for someone to give you an opportunity that will probably never happen if you just wait for it, or you create your own opportunities by just making content, which is like now easier than ever, like to just get a camera and some friends and make stuff. Because if it's something you care about and if it's good quality, people will see it. So like make stuff, and that's also a way to hone your craft, because if it's the first project you get to make, like it's not gonna be great. You need to make the like other stuff first to kind of sharpen your tools, so when the time comes to make the big thing or whatever, you will have honed those skills. So I just make as much stuff as possible.
Yeah,
that's my piece of advice.
yeah, and I love that. And like get it out there, make it and finish it
Yeah,
and put it out there. Yeah,
yeah, and that's another kind of thing
that's awesome.
I
So,
kind of learned with the YouTube stuff, which like you could tweak things forever. You could, like post-production, even pre-production, script. At some point, you got to just say, "Cool, it's done." Put it out there, and obviously being precious is good because you care about it. You make it as great as possible, but not being overly precious to the point where you never put anything out. So yeah, it's a healthy balance is what I would strive for.
yeah, I love that you said that too, because that's very true. It's so, like, literally for all of it, for writing, like on the writing stage, for editing too. I'm sure you can drive yourself crazy.
Oh
But
yeah,
yeah, so
you could
sometimes
get it
complete
forever.
is better than perfect. Yeah. So it sounds like also that you work with a lot of the same, you still work with a lot of the same actors and like filmmakers from school, right? So who went to Chapman together? Like, which one of you guys know each other from Chapman?
Yeah, so man, I mean, just from Trust alone, and again, I've worked with a lot of these people many a times before Trust, but just on Trust, like two of the leads, so Jennifer Levinson, the lead, who also wrote the script, she's from Chapman, and then Heston Horwin is from Chapman as well. We've been friends for a very, very long time. Kate Spare is not, but we call her honorary Chapmanite. And then Max Landworth, who produced Trust, he's a great friend, also from Chapman. Stan Olsen, who shot the film, like he's from Chapman. A lot of his crew's from Chapman. Man, I'm sure I'm forgetting people, but there's a lot of the even like key positions are from Chapman.
Yeah. Oh, I really love that. That's so cool because you see that in the industry that, like at every level, you form your community, like your group that works really well together. So that's really cool that you've been doing that, you from the beginning. That's awesome.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I definitely, I loved I loved Chapman. I loved going to Chapman, and that's when people ask me about it. That's kind of my biggest things. Like obviously, I learned a ton. Like I like really have a much wider skill set leaving Chapman than before coming to Chapman, obviously, but the biggest takeaway is like the community that I've formed, because it's just like accompanied me to this day.
All right, awesome. Okay, I'm gonna ask you a few questions, a few just fun questions. Okay.
Cool. Love it.
If you were a professional athlete, what sport would you play and why?
Wow, that's an interesting question. Was a professional athlete. When I was a teenager, I think my dad had this idea that maybe there's a world I could be a professional golf player. I'm like nowhere near good enough, especially now. When I was much better when I played all the time when I was a kid. Now I'm like not very good.
Okay.
I'm very like whatever. But maybe there's another version of life where I could have been that. So I'll just say golf player.
Amazing. So you played golf growing up. That's really cool. I mean, you've played before, at least, Some people like, yeah, like I could answer that question with a sport I've never played. So you're good. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I played like tennis and I wrestled in high school as well, but I know I couldn't have been a professional either of those. So I'll just go with golf.
Okay, awesome. And this podcast is called Behind the Now, but I always like to emphasize be the now, which is totally up to your interpretation. But how do you be the now? So most people interpret that as like, how do you stay present? Like if there's anything you consciously do, or maybe just when do you feel present?
That's a good question. I try to like every day remind myself of like, it's easy to tell yourself like, oh, like one day I'll do this, one day I'll become that, or I can't wait till I accomplish blank, blank, and blank. But looking back at the things you have accomplished and like the people that are in your life that you're like thankful for, again, it's like relationships, accomplishments. And then I do often like meditate, and it helps me to, again, kind of be thankful for things now and just be as present as possible. So that's part of my like routine, you could say.
Yeah, I do too. I'm the same actually. Do you have a way in which you meditate, if you want to talk about that?
I try to do it like either earlier in the day or later in the day, but usually I try to kind of like start the day with it, and then it's just it's usually short, like 10-ish minutes, and I use the Calm app. Love it. Tamara Levitt's voice she's a beautiful voice. So I listen to, either like a daily calm or like a short meditation. And sometimes it has a specific focus for like that day. I don't know if you're familiar with the app at all, but yeah, so sometimes there's a specific like subject and sometimes it's just a general meditation.
Okay, amazing. Yeah, maybe I have a little bit, but it's not like my regular one. But that's awesome. And then where can our listeners find you or find your work? What do you want to, yeah.
Well, so I mean, on the Instagrams, I'm at almog.aa. So you can kind of follow along with like where Trust is going and future work and previous work. And then obviously my website is almogaa.com. And yeah, that's where you can find all my things.
Okay, incredible. And Trust is absolutely amazing. So everyone should go see that. Is there, do you know when the next screening is of Trust?
So the next one we know of, we're waiting to hear back from a couple others, but the next one we know of is October 22nd, I believe. And that's at the Silicon Valley Jewish Film Festival. So I'll be in the Bay Area. And I'll be there for that. And Jen will be there too. So that'll be fun. And then hopefully soon after, we will, at some point we'll be out on streaming. We don't know when or where yet, but we'll be working with our distributor, Menemsha Films, to figure that out. So we'll let the world know once that happens.
Okay. So I was so, like, Jen was on this podcast and I was so excited because I heard so much about it. And she's so amazing. And Michael Laskin as well. And I
That's
knew
right.
he was working on it, I think, kind of when I was talking, when he was on it. Yeah. Yeah. So it's just really, it's amazing. Like, just everyone on there is really so talented. Well, thank you so much for doing this. I love talking to you. You're so
Thank you so
talented.
much.
And it's cool to hear your, yeah. I've loved talking to you and hearing more about your process behind everything.
Thank you so much for having me. It was actually so much fun.